Hello, and welcome to the Rejuvenation Roundup podcast, where we explore the latest in life extension and anti-aging science with a dive into a month's worth of insights and new breakthroughs. This podcast is a combined effort of the Lifespan Extension Advocacy Foundation, which operates Lifespan.io, and Future Grind, a podcast that explores the ethics and impact of emerging science and technology. March was a productive month for aging research, and there's a lot to cover, so let's dive right in. In a recent review paper, scientists show that exercise can alleviate age-related cognitive decline, but not all types of exercise are created equal. Numerous studies have tested the effect of exercise on age-related cognitive decline, mostly with positive results, but there are many confounding variables. In this new review, which encompasses 44 studies with almost 5,000 participants, the authors set out to determine the minimum and optimal amounts of various types of exercise for influencing age-related cognitive decline. The review shows that there is no minimum amount of exercise below which it does not promote cognition. This sits well with the saying that some exercise is better than no exercise. It found that walking and weightlifting had less pronounced effects on cognition than aerobic exercises, and that a mix of various aerobic exercises yielded good results, but a balanced combination of resistance training, weightlifting, and other exercise may be better. One other important finding: obesity seems to diminish the beneficial effect of exercise. However, this review reminds us that exercise is one of the few interventions available today that can put a dent in aging. Moving on, a team of researchers from SENS Research Foundation has described a new method of enriching natural killer cells, or NK cells, to fight senescent cells. Previous experiments have shown that NK cells are partially responsible for the clearance of senescent cells from the human body. Techniques are being developed to use this senolytic ability of NK cells as a potential therapy. In this study, the researchers used cultured enriched NK cells and reported that after a 4-day co-culture, virtually all senescent cells were killed. A next step could be to explore this technique in animal models to gauge its therapeutic potential. In a new population study, scientists have found more evidence that consuming a lot of meat might not be a good idea, though the association between meat and cancer depends on multiple factors. The study included health data from over 470,000 people who were free from cancer at recruitment. The participants were categorized as regular meat eaters, low meat eaters, fish eaters, and vegetarians. The average follow-up period was 11.4 years. The researchers assessed the relationship between those dietary habits and the risk of all types of cancer. The researchers accounted for multiple potentially important variables, including age, BMI, physical activity, socio-economic status, education, smoking, alcohol consumption, and diabetes. Compared with regular meat eaters, being a low meat eater, fish eater, or vegetarian were all associated with a slight reduction of overall cancer risk. In men, the risk of colorectal cancer in low meat eaters, fish eaters, and vegetarians was significantly reduced compared to regular meat eaters, and being a fish eater or a vegetarian was associated with a 20% and 31% lower risk of prostate cancer, respectively. Still, it is virtually impossible to account for all possible factors, and the researchers list many caveats. For instance, they admit that they were unable to adjust for total energy intake because no such question was asked at recruitment. Given how potent caloric restriction has been proven in mitigating health risks, this overlooked factor might be important. As in some other similar studies, no distinction was made between vegetarians and vegans, although this could be relevant as well. Evidence exists that a higher intake of dairy products may increase the risk of prostate cancer. In a new population study, scientists show that dog ownership is associated with a lower risk of developing disability in old age. Scientists collected data from more than 11,000 elderly people in Japan to try and understand how owning a dog or cat affects a person's risk of disability and overall mortality. The researchers saw that current dog ownership cut the risk of developing a disability during the follow-up period almost in half. Cat ownership showed no such correlation. While physical activity is obviously increased by dog ownership, this variable was controlled for. It did not explain the correlation between dog ownership and disability risk, but it was shown to enhance the effect. People who were both current dog owners and physically active were the ones most protected from the onset of disability. That's it for our research roundup. You can find more on these and other stories on our website at lifespan.io/roundup. Some more videos from our Ending Age-Related Diseases conference have been released, including one of Greg Grinberg discussing how we can use better media strategies to improve the longevity movement, and he started with a clip from Star Trek.
It's ironic, isn't it? All this magnificent technology, we still find ourselves susceptible to the ravages of old age. Loss of dignity. The slow betrayal of our bodies by forces we cannot master. Do you still want to be one of us, Data?
There's a pattern that I see playing out again and again. A patient gets diagnosed with a chronic disease, a horrible, debilitating, progressive chronic disease. And they ask their doctor to do everything that they can. And the doctor prescribes them pharmaceuticals. And then procedures are scheduled. And then again, the patient asks their doctor to do everything that they can. And then finally, something catastrophic happens. And as the patient is being wheeled from the emergency room into the surgical bay, the patient or their family members plead with the medical team, do everything you can. Well, that's why I love this community. It's really clear that we in the regenerative medicine community are giving tremendous heart, brain power, and sheer force of will to bring an end to this epidemic of chronic disease, and to do that for everybody. But are we doing everything that we can? And I'm here to argue today that the answer is no, and that that's actually a good thing, because that means that there's something that we can do to end this epidemic even faster. And compared to what some of you have already done and are already doing, I would argue that it's downright straightforward. So I think it's safe to say that historically, maybe not so much our current approach, but historically our approach to media has been kind of a mess. When we rely on outside content creators to tell our story, we kind of end up with, we sort of get what we pay for. We put nothing in, but we actually get very little out. Sometimes we get negative brand value out of it. I think it's especially true when legitimate regenerative medicine research is conflated with pseudoscience or just flat out non-scientific efforts. Low production value doesn't help either. And I think also dangerous is that even when we do have some pretty good production value, like with Veritasium, we get these sort of non-expert kind of curatorial and editorial opinions along with the facts. And this particular video that this screenshot here is from, the host expresses the opinion that no matter what we do, we're not going to see the end of the chronic disease epidemic through regenerative medicine research anytime soon. So it's just kind of presented as an intellectual curiosity. And as Pat pointed out, people don't give to intellectual curiosities. They give to things that affect them personally. So there is a lot of crosstalk between public relations and donor relations. A very similar story on the side of media relations. If we don't have sufficient resources for media relations, we get these sort of clickbait headlines on immortality. We get an abject failure to appropriately proportion and contextualize the so-called risks of what we're doing, those, the sort of throwaway questions that people have, like, what if dictators live forever or whatever, versus the absolutely horrific reality that the chronic disease epidemic represents today. And we do get this kind of cartoonish treatment of our leading scientists as well. And I think that that's a tragedy. I don't think it's going to take a lot of money to fix this, but it will take some. So as Pat was pointing out about building up an infrastructure for fundraising, we also need to build up an infrastructure to really step up our game in terms of media relations. And I think that applies across our entire community. My opening clip is not a coincidence. I think it's really telling that even in Gene Roddenberry's vision of Star Trek, this near-term future with warp drive and transporters and a capitalist economy that's been replaced by a gift economy in which currency doesn't exist anymore and poverty doesn't exist anymore, and people work together and work to better themselves. It's so telling that even in that imagined near-term future universe, we don't see the end of chronic disease. We don't see the end of the diseases of aging or the end of the aging process itself. And I do think that that's why efforts like Tim Maupin's are so important also. It's not just about nonfiction and media relations in terms of news outlets and documentaries such as like what we're working on and putting together as part of this overall effort, but also engaging viewers in narrative works, in works of fiction that envision the world that we envision and can share that vision with the public. Because certainly, I think we've all seen in our lifetimes that fiction, particularly really good science fiction, tends to have a way of becoming science fact, at least a lot of the time, by igniting the public imagination.
You can find more of this video and another new one featuring Daniel Ives of Shift Bioscience discussing how genes themselves might provide effective aging clocks on our YouTube channel. We've also released new episodes of Lifespan News, including an update on the resveratrol controversy involving Dr. David Sinclair, some highlights of our blockchain and longevity panel from the Ending Age-Related Diseases Conference, and a dive into a study that showed that GlyNAC increased the longevity of mice by 24%. Perhaps the biggest story featured a well-known Altos Labs scientist making his prediction for when aging might be treatable. Here's some of that.
As we've covered, Altos Labs recently exited stealth mode to announce $3 billion in funding, reportedly from investors including Jeff Bezos, and a team full of Nobel Prize winners and pioneering scientists. However, the secretive company's representatives insist that Altos is not an anti-aging or longevity company. Despite this, a key member of their scientific leadership recently publicly stated that he is convinced that, using the same technology they're working with at Altos, we will be able to prevent aging within 20 years. The scientist making these bold claims is Juan Carlos Espizua Belmonte, a Spanish biochemist and biologist who has spent nearly 30 years pioneering innovations in developmental biology, regenerative medicine, and aging research at the Salk Institute. Among the work that Belmonte is most associated with is cellular reprogramming. As a very brief background, in 2006, a study showed that it was possible to reprogram cells using just 4 master genes. These 4 reprogramming factors are often called the Yamanaka factors after one of their discoverers, Shinya Yamanaka, who also happens to be part of the Altos Labs team. Belmonte built upon this work with a promising study in 2016. Here's how it was described by Science to Save the World.
Some researchers believe that it might be possible to avoid cancer and reverse aging in old cells without completely reverting them to pluripotency. In other words, they thought there was a way for us to have our cake and eat it too. But no one had successfully managed to achieve this in living animals. This was all about to change in December 2016. Professor Juan Carlos Espizua Belmonte and his team of researchers at the Salk Institute reported the conclusion of their study, which showed for the first time that the cells and organs of a living animal could be rejuvenated. After just 6 weeks of this treatment, which steadily reprogrammed the cells of the mice, the researchers noticed improvements in their appearance, including reduced age-related spinal curvature. The control mice showed a range of age-related changes compared to the treated mice, which had a number of aging signs halted or even reversed, including some epigenetic alterations. The treated mice also experienced a 50% increase in their mean survival time in comparison to untreated progeric control mice.
So Belmonte and his team of researchers demonstrated that the cells and organs of a living animal could be rejuvenated using cellular reprogramming. In the years following this research, their work continued, and it was speculated that Belmonte and his colleagues may spin out a biotech startup based on this research. Instead, it was announced in January of 2022 that Belmonte would be leaving the Salk Institute to become the director of Altos Labs' San Diego Institute of Science. Altos Labs says that they are focused on cellular rejuvenation programming to restore cell health and resilience with the goal of reversing disease to transform medicine. Ultimately, it sounds like they are working with Yamanaka factors to master cellular reprogramming, or perhaps more accurately, partial cellular reprogramming, in humans. Recently, Belmonte published new research, which, like his 2016 work, involved living mice. The work was published in the journal Nature Aging and showed that intermittently activating the Yamanaka factors in middle-aged healthy mice led to rejuvenating effects in different tissues, such as the kidney and skin. Belmonte is already planning similar work in monkeys and believes that it could translate to humans as well. He spoke about it to the Spanish newspaper El País. We can program and rejuvenate the tissues and organs of animals with different pathologies, as well as rejuvenate their cells. Conceptually, I find no reason that stops us from thinking that similar results cannot be achieved in humans, both with respect to improving the course of many diseases and with the rise in the length and quality of life. Indeed, we have already demonstrated this with in vitro human cells. Then came this bold prediction. I am convinced that within 2 decades, we will have tools that not only treat symptoms, but also can predict, prevent, and treat diseases and aging through cellular rejuvenation. He is saying that he is convinced that within 20 years, so by 2042, we'll be able to treat aging. Belmonte also made it clear that, despite the concerns that may exist in the general public, this technology is not expected to be only for the rich. Our end goal is to find new forms of helping everyone to slow or even reverse the processes that lead to disease. Our interest is in advancing in this area of knowledge and opening the field as wide as possible so that over time, everyone can benefit. He also made an argument similar to one that Altos Labs might make when insisting that they are not an anti-aging or longevity company. The idea behind our investigations is not so that human beings live 100 or 1,000 years more. If we are able to prolong life without improving the quality of these years, not only would it be morally questionable, but also I would question what purpose it would serve. Our main goal is to enable people to have a healthier life for a longer period of time and to reverse illness in patients of all ages. I think we're splitting hairs here, but if you can treat aging in 20 years, I don't care if you call yourself a tire shop. It's the results that matter, and it's the results that we'll be watching closely.
You can find these and more episodes of Lifespan News on their YouTube channel. Or head over to the Science to Save the World YouTube to see their new videos, including one that explores consciousness in the dying brain, one on using AI to decipher ancient texts, and one highlighting women who have changed the world through science. Finishing things up with a news nugget, Insilico Medicine, a clinical stage end-to-end artificial intelligence-driven drug discovery company, announced that it has successfully established a unique approach to identify potential dual-purpose targets for therapeutics of aging and age-associated diseases with its proprietary AI-enabled biological target discovery platform. Upon the comprehensive assessment, 145 genes were considered as potential aging-related targets and mapped into corresponding aging hallmarks. The research was published in the journal Aging. That's it for this episode of the Rejuvenation Roundup podcast. Thank you very much for spending another month with us and for your help in the fight against age-related diseases. Whether you're donating, spreading the word, or simply listening to our content, we appreciate your help. Remember to subscribe, leave a review, and post about us on social media. This will increase our reach and introduce more people to the importance of life extension science. Don't forget, you can get additional deep dives into science, technology, and futurism on the Future Grind podcast. Find out more at futuregrind.org. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time on the Rejuvenation Roundup podcast.